Hello, everybody. I would like to introduce myself, Paul Eady, a retired headmaster and teacher for more than 40 years. And it's a great pleasure to welcome Gary Fisher from Alexander Forbes, Alexander Forbes are going to be a key partner in Think Teacher's suite of products. Most teachers don't go into teaching thinking about money. They go into teaching because of altruism, because they want to make a difference, because they love children. And a lot of teachers end up not planning for their retirement. So throughout your teaching career, you're told you must make provision for retirement. You must put money aside. And many teachers now are given a cost to company package and perhaps don't get this right. And because teachers are not flush with money, they sometimes, when they move from one job to another or one pension fund to another, they take the money and use it for something else. And I think it's imperative that teachers are given sound financial advice about their planning long term. I was chatting to a bursar, a business manager at a conference the other day, who described himself as a social worker with a checkbook. And this really, I think, summed up in many ways how teachers handle their money and think about it. They expect the money in their account at the end of the month for their salary, but it's pretty short term and there's very little planning. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Gary Fisher of Alexander Forbes, and we look forward to what you have to say, Gary. Thank you for joining us.
Right. Good morning, everybody, and thank you very much, Paul, for that introduction. So I'd like to just add on to what Paul said there as well. And, you know, when you plan for your future, it's very important to start right from the beginning. The unfortunate thing is that during our lives, things happen. And, you know, it's very difficult to deal with those things as we go through our lives. So importantly, to get assistance and to start on the right foot. So if we look at a couple of facts within the South African environment, I'm sure these things will scare you a little, but fear not, because if we have a plan in place, we can overcome these. So let's just have a look at what I'm showing you on the screen there. Less than 10% of South Africans retire with enough income, and only 2% retire comfortably. Now, what does that mean? For many of us, we live off a salary from month to month. And if we can continue that once we have retired, in other words, using the same income or very similar income to take us through our retirement, in my mind, we've achieved what we've set out to do. The harsh reality is that most people don't, and that's what these statistics are telling us. So the important thing, and I think Paul mentioned it in the beginning as well, is if you move between jobs, is to make sure that you allow that investment that you started to continue. If we look at how our lives have progressed over the years, in the past, people retired at 65, or in fact, some people still do, but many of us, unfortunately, have to continue working past that date for the reasons that I've just explained. And the chief reason for people not, having enough money when they retire is the fact that the third point there, when they change jobs, they do not preserve the benefits. So in effect, you're starting from zero every single time. You work at a company for 5 or 10 years, then you start fresh again. And by the time you hit 50, you don't have enough time left because, you've only got 10 or 15 years still to go. So it's not all bad news, because some of us do save and some of us do try and make an effort. And hopefully you are one of those people. But we need to know whether we are on the right track. Are we doing the right things? Are we accounting for inflation? Perhaps you've got other investments. Are they all pointing in the right direction? And that's what we need to find out. So, yes, we all have comfortable dreams. We all would like to, as the slide shows, retire on the beach, at the beach somewhere, and spend our golden years, as they call them, really enjoying it. And you can do that, but you need to make plans and you need to have a goal in order to do that. So there you can see it. You need to have a goal, then you need to have a plan, and very specialist or professional advice along the way. And in your profession as a teacher, you are a specialist in that field. So when it comes to financial advice, perhaps you don't know everything about financial advice or the financial world. Get somebody who is professionally qualified that can assist you and make sure that you understand the process every step of the way. So in setting your retirement goals, it starts really with what you want to do. When do you, as an individual, want to retire? As I said earlier, perhaps your company has set a retirement age of 60 or 65 or whatever that may be. And in very many instances, some people want to retire at 55. The fact of the matter is, maybe you can retire at 55, but it all depends on what you want to do. And then, of course, the very important question, will you have enough money to retire at 55 or 60 or 65? Because, as I mentioned earlier, that's what's going to set you up for a comfortable retirement. We all got these plans and, the beach house and having a good time, but you need the money to continue to have that or to support your lifestyle. And then what we'll also look at is, once you've saved that amount of money, let's say you're planning to retire at 65, and now your investment is building up and you have this money in your account, how's that going to translate into a pension or an annuity in later life? So if I want to earn, and let's take a figure, let's say I would like to, just for interest's sake, have a pension of 10,000 Rand a month, I need to know what that capital amount is that's going to enable me to earn a pension of 10,000 Rand a month for the rest of my life. So the big unknown there is, how long is the rest of my life going to be? If you told me 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, then we could work it out quite easily mathematically and say, that's how much you need as a capital injection, and this is how much you'll get every single month for the rest of those 10 or 20 or 30 years. So the big unknown, obviously, is how long we're going to be on retirement. But what I would say to you is, plan for the longest time, because with medical advances and people, technologies, people are living longer. There's no doubt about it. Yes, we have many more distractions today, but, I've heard of stories where people have been on pension for longer than they actually worked. Now, if you just take a minute and think about that, working lifetime is generally around 40 years. If you're going to be on retirement for 40 years, that means you're going to need to have quite a big lump sum of money in order to ensure, that monthly income is sustainable. And very importantly, in those 40 years, for example, costs are going to rise. They're not going to stay the same. So that means that your pension, your annuity income will need to rise as well as it does while you're working. So as you get increases while you work, you would like your pension in your retirement years to increase too. Now, this is a very important slide, and I'd like to spend a bit of time on it because it tries to address that question of how much do I need to get to my goals. And what we talk about at Alexander Forbes is a replacement ratio. And what that simply means is that I would like to replace my final salary with an income that's going to give me an annuity payment for the rest of my life. And typically what that means is you would like to replace your final salary with a pension of around 75%. So in my example earlier, if I earned an income of 10,000 Rand a month as my final salary, I would aim for my annuity payment or my pension to be around 7,500 Rand a month. So very close to that final salary. And people sometimes say, well, why 75%? And again, it's a personal thing, because you can make it 100% or 80% or 90%. And that just depends on your lifestyle. How much money do you need to get by on a monthly basis? And that's really what we're trying to get at. So in my example there, let's say you're 20 years old, you're starting off in your career, and you need to know how much of your salary you need to save a month. And there's the number on the screen. So 19% of what you earn needs to be put away into something like a pension fund or a provident fund or a retirement annuity, some kind of retirement investment that's going to give you reasonable growth over a 40-year period. And then if we go along that curve, you can see, let's say I'm now 30 years old and I'm only starting with my retirement savings, because from 20 to 30, let's say I cashed in, I spent that money on buying a car or putting down a deposit on a house, or just generally getting around the things that happen with life. That contribution now becomes bigger. So I now need to save 29% of my salary in order to have that replacement ratio of 75%. And then by the time I get to 40, you can see that I have to save almost half of my salary in order to achieve that retirement objective of 75% of final income. So I guess, the message really is start as early as possible, do the right things, and if you're not sure, get professional advice. And people sometimes say to me, well, who can I trust? Or what do you mean by a professional financial advisor? And it's quite simple. In the environment we live in today, you can find out who a professional financial advisor is. So, what I can suggest is you go onto the Financial Planning Institute of Southern Africa, you go onto their website, and you can actually find out who a professional financial advisor is. So we call them certified financial planners, and they've done all the necessary studying for financial planning, and they keep their knowledge levels up to standard. So in order to retain that qualification, they must continue year by year to certify themselves. So, and that applies to anybody, myself included. You think you might know everything around the changes to the legislation and all of those things. But when it comes to making decisions around your future finance, make sure you have somebody that can help you, and that most importantly, you feel comfortable with. And it's quite simple. I'll normally, compare it to going to a doctor. If you go to a doctor, you're not feeling well, and he tells you what medicine to take or what to do, and you don't feel comfortable with it, what do? You get a second opinion. And it's exactly the same with financial advice. If you're not feeling comfortable, get a second or a third opinion until you can find the individual that you feel comfortable with ultimately, and they can give you sound advice. So this is a very interesting slide. And what we've done here is we have around 1 million members in our combined retirement funds across all platforms. And so based on what I've just told you, if we look at these numbers, the average projected replacement ratio, for these members is around 40%. So remember earlier we spoke about 75%. So what that kind of tells you is that most people are lagging behind with their retirement savings. And yes, the only information that we have here is that individual's membership of his or her retirement fund. We don't know that they might have other investments outside of their pension or provident fund. So there are a few unknowns, but it gives you a good idea of what the average South African is kind of dealing with. But the big numbers there that are important for me are the third from the right, where it says retirees who achieved a replacement ratio of 80% or higher. And you can see that that number is just over 5%. Now, again, that speaks to what I said earlier. Most people are unable to achieve that target. And then on the far right, the preservation rate currently is around 8%. So that means that when a person moves from job A to job B, only 8 out of 100 people are actually seeking financial advice and are then transferring that pension fund money across to their new company. And that's rather scary, because if you don't do that fundamental or basic thing, then you're not going to allow the money to grow over time and get to that 75 or 80% replacement ratio. If we look at the total average contributions to retirement funds, that also tells a story, because earlier on I mentioned that as a 20-year-old, you should be saving around 19% of your income. But the fact of the matter here is that most people are only saving on average around 12%. So you can see immediately there's a disconnect. People aren't saving enough. And there may be different reasons for that. Perhaps you're unable to. But what I'd like to instill in you today is that if you are in that position, when your situation changes, when you are able to contribute more, try and do it. And that becomes very, very difficult as you get older, because, you know, life happens. You now have a house, you have a car, you have a family, you have children at school, and somebody's saying to you, you need to contribute more to retirement. You can't, because of all these other expenses that you have. But if you do get a promotion, if you do get an increase, if you do get a bonus or something like that, try and set aside a portion of that, channel it towards retirement, because ultimately it's going to make a difference towards the amount of money that you have left over for retirement. And then, you know, as members of our retirement funds at Alexander Forbes, we send them what we call projection statements on a regular basis. So it essentially talks to what I've been telling you about, this replacement ratio. And an average member would be able to see how far they are on track to achieving a replacement ratio of roughly 75%. So I'd like to just give you a sense of how that works and what that means. So if we look at the screen there, that is what an average person's replacement ratio looks like. And please don't try and read everything. It's quite a busy slide. But the point that I want to draw your attention to in this particular example is that person, we've taken their projected pension and we've put it in rand terms. So this individual, if he had to stop or she had to stop working right now, would earn a pension, and this is an annual sum, of around 50,000 rand as a pension. And obviously you'd need to divide that by 12, and that would be their pension on a monthly basis. So in order to get to our ideal of 75%, what would this person need to do? This individual would need to contribute another 22%. So yes, you might look at that and say, well, how can I just contribute an extra 22% to my salary? I just don't have the money. But in my mind, at least I can see what I need to aspire to. If I can't save 22%, even if I save 2% extra this year, it's going to make a big difference. And so that top number of 49,000 will start to grow. And then if I'm unable to save, what the next number is telling me is how long or how much extra after my retirement date I would need to work. So in this particular example, this individual, their retirement age was 60. So he or she needs to work another 6 years and contribute at the same rate that they were contributing at in order to achieve that replacement ratio of 75% of salary. So it gives you a bit of an example of, what you need to do and how you need to do it in order to achieve your goals. And for me, if I knew this a bit earlier in my life too, it would have helped me, because when you don't know, you just don't know, isn't it? And, you kind of wish that there was somebody there that could help you and give you this advice. And perhaps I'm being a bit harsh on myself, because my dad did tell me what to do, but, you just don't do it. So, again, try and get the necessary advice and from somebody that you trust. Okay, so again, it's a continuous question there, checking whether you are on track. You don't just do this calculation and then you say, okay, well, that's it. Make sure you're tinkering with it. You are on the right track. What about your particular situation? Are you married? Is there another person that you're going to need to take care of when you retire? So if there's two of you, that means you're going to need a little bit more money. What about things like your medical aid? Remember, when you do retire from your employment, you would need to fund the contributions to your medical aid. And as you know, as you get older, the chances of getting sick, of potentially going to a hospital are higher. So medical aid becomes very, very important. What we tend to find is that people try and scale down their medical aid as they get older. Then they do get sick, and then they've got huge co-payments. So make sure that you've taken that into account. Make sure that you've also looked at your other retirement savings. As I mentioned earlier, you may already have preserved funds into preservation funds or retirement annuities. When last have you had a look at those investments? Are they still attached to the right investment strategy? Is there something you can do? You must remember that legislation changes from year to year. So that retirement annuity that you took out in your 20s, it might not be doing the right thing for you. So, if you need to change it, get your financial advisor to look at it, see what you can do. And it might just be that you need to change the investment strategy, because you invested in cash and you thought you were invested in the market, for example. So little things like that might make a big difference in your planning towards retirement. And then, as I said earlier, what is your particular situation? Are you married? Are there people dependent on you? Perhaps you've got grandchildren that you're paying school fees for. And all of those things, are important to consider. And then the retirement age, as I said, when can you realistically afford to retire? And for me, that is very, very important. Let's say you were planning to retire at 65, but you're healthy, you still have chances or offers of employment. Then if that was me, I would continue working, because I would then, I wouldn't have to rely on my retirement savings in order to get me through. In fact, if I did that, my retirement savings, I could defer to a later age, and I could only start drawing down then, maybe at the age of 68 or 69 or 70. That would give me enough time. And if I have a smaller retirement egg, that would allow it then to smooth over time. So some of the tools that we have on our on-site platform as well at Alexander Forbes, you can see there, for example, if you're doing some financial planning, that would be the best place to start. And I often say to people when they say, who can help me with these things? I say to them, first, get yourself up to that standard. Do a little bit of checking yourself, go onto our financial planning retirement projection tools, play around a bit, try and understand what we're trying to tell you. And then when you need to go to the next step, get hold of a certified financial planner and ask the questions that haven't been, that the tool hasn't been able to answer for you. And then another very important thing is, do you know where you are invested within your retirement investment? So let's just go through that again. Retirement investments or compulsory investments are things like pension funds, provident funds, or retirement annuities, or they could even be preservation funds. But the engine that drives your money is the investment behind it. And that investment strategy is critically important. So each asset within that investment strategy has a role to play. And I'd just like to talk a little bit about that with you now. So the four basic asset classes within any well-diversified investment are equity type investments or shares, as we know them, property type investments. So for example, the house that you live in, that you bought, commercial property investments. And then the two at the bottom there are cash. I think we all know what that is. So you get an interest rate from the bank, for example. They pay you 5 or 6% per annum, and you receive that on an ongoing basis. Likewise, things like bonds, government bonds or corporate bonds, you receive an interest rate from them, or you buy a portion of it. And over time, this amalgamation of investments grows in order to that lump sum, that fund credit that we were speaking about earlier. So each one of them has a role to play over the life cycle of your investment. And this graph really talks to what I was trying to explain to you earlier. So if we took 100 investors over a 40-year period, and in this particular example, the period is from 1981 to 2021. So again, that's an average person's life cycle of working. And if we look at the different colors on that screen, those are how these four investment types that I've just explained have performed over time. And so you can see there, the orangey sort of pinky color is the property investment. The blue or the light blue color is the all share index or the shares, the equity investment. And then down the bottom there, we've got our cash investment, which is a kind of a green color on my screen. And then the bond index, which is a whitish color. But the most important thing in this example is that inflation, the yellow line running right down the bottom there, has been beaten by all four of those asset classes. And if we had to chop and dice this graph into different periods, there will be times when the returns that you're receiving are below inflation. And that becomes a worry. So make sure that the combination of these kinds of investments are always in line with what the prevailing conditions are. Luckily, where we are currently, inflation is relatively low because of the conditions within the market. But we're starting to see signs of pressure on prices, and that means inflation starts to increase, and that plays an important role in how your investment performs. So make sure you have the correct mix of investments, and again, if you're not sure, get some specialist advice. And then the other thing that I like to take out of this graph is if you look at that period, so from 1981 to, let's say, roughly, 2003. So that's almost a 20-year period. You can see that the growth on that investment has remained pretty linear or pretty low. It's only after 2003 that you start to see your property and your equity investments really climbing. And why do you think that is? It's really to do with something called compound interest. So what that means is over time, your investment grows and it grows and it grows. You get interest and growth and dividends and all good things like that over a period of time. And then they start to compound. But what is the essential ingredient here? It's time. So, if you're going to work only for 5 or 10 years and take the money and then start again and work another 15 years, take the money and start again, you're not going to see that massive growth that is indicated by these points on the graph over here. So you need to be invested for a long period of time. And ultimately, those small amounts, those contributions over time translate into massive growth as you get closer to the final period, to the end of your 40-year working life period. So very, very important. And, hopefully that you understood how the investments work over time there. And then the last sort of point, remember, we looked at the goal, we looked at the plan, and now what about the advice? So put all this advice and all these plans into action. And I've mentioned this a couple of times this morning, but speak to a financial advisor who can help you, who can show you how to save more money for retirement, and, ultimately somebody that you feel comfortable with. And then the last point there, setting up a will. Very often you talk to people and you say, just before they're about to retire, I've worked with people and they say to me, no, I don't have a will. I don't have enough money or enough assets. And, that is unfortunately one of the fundamental mistakes that people make as well, because whatever you have, you'd like it to go to the people that you want it to go to. So the only way you can do that within an estate plan is to write it down, put it on paper, set up a will, and a financial planner would be able to assist you with that. And it shouldn't cost you anything, but make sure that it is well understood and that there's no gray areas within your will. So when that day comes, they can administer it for you, and your assets, whatever you have, go to the people that you would like it to go to. And then just to end off with, on our website too, we have what we call a My Money Matters toolkit, which can help you and assist you. We have various videos around the topics that I've spoken about this morning. We've got brochures there. You can phone us. We've got a call center. Simply put it to the individual what it is that you require. You just like to start off by looking at the toolkit, or if you feel you want financial advice already at that stage, there will be somebody that can assist you and give you the necessary information that you need. And then the very last slide from my side is just to say that in terms of legislation, in terms of the FAIS Act, or the Financial Advisory and Intermediary Services Act, it's important to understand that what I've shared with you this morning is not advice. So, please don't go and say, I listened to Gary and this is what he told me to do. I've really just tried to highlight what the important things are. And what this act says is that you cannot give advice in a public space or a public forum. So in order for me to give you advice, we need to sit down on a one-to-one basis, and you need to share with me, and I need to tell you what I can do for you as well. But hopefully I've given you enough pointers. I've sketched it for you so that going forward, you would take those necessary steps. And I wish you all of the best. I hope that you will have a successful retirement one day, and that along the way, you'd get people to help you that know what they're talking about and that have the necessary information at hand. So thank you very much. All the best. And it was a pleasure speaking to you.